He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
No mai whakarongo mai ki te aotai whenua. Welcome to Country Life. I'm Janina Schwanica.
Lovely to have your company. Thanks for joining us. I'm Duncan Smith.
I introduce you to a couple trying to get more bugs into their greenhouses, where they grow curiously shaped tomatoes.
And to carry those tasty toms to the kitchen, you need a garden basket. So we're off to Tākaka to meet a trug maker.
And later, Sally takes you almost to the top of the North Island to meet some foresters keen to turn their waste slash into something good for the planet, biochar.
But first, it's that time of the month again where we put in calls to farmers and growers around the motu to hear what's been happening. And in Northland, Te Tai Tokerau, it's starting to get dry, with our farmer contact describing it as a bit crusty on top. It's far from a crisis though, and harvesting of silage is largely done with maize being planted. Most farmers are at the tail end of the mating period, though bulls will remain out for a few more weeks. Dairy farmers are reasonably happy, especially after another price increase. In Pukekohe, growers are now well into harvesting spring crops of potatoes, onions and carrots. Not a lot of rain has fallen this month, and irrigators are on where necessary.
Maize crops are struggling in Waikato. Feed supplies have also been impacted by an outbreak of greasy cutworms, damaging maize and brassica crops, some of which have had to be replanted. Farmers are putting nitrogen on and lengthening rotations to go into summer with higher pasture cover. AI has finished, though the bulls are still out. Bees are busy pollinating Bay of Plenty orchards, and flowering is largely over. Despite an early setback in the number of flowers, growers will make the most of it, and things have been going well. Kiwi fruit growers are hoping for a dry, hot summer. The November forecast indicated a 50 cent per tray increase for gold varieties and 30 cent per tray increase for green kiwi fruit. Labour supply is looking good in the region.
It's been a good month for Taranaki. Adequate rain and sun for north and central parts means more surplus feed down the track. South and coastal areas still need some extra rain. Only about 70 millimetres has been recorded this past month. Cow condition is good and they are milking well. The region has also been hit by greasy cutworm, but with a good dairy payout, most farmers are pretty happy. Soil moisture and pasture levels have dropped in East Coast, Te Tai Rāwhiti, which our agent contact says is quite concerning. Rain this last week varied across the region, with some recording 50 millimetres and others just 10 millimetres. Any rain will help lock in grass growth and give pastures a lift until Christmas. Farmers are getting a bit nervous about feed. There are concerns the store lamb market could crash if the dry continues and farmers are forced to destock. Lamb weaning is about to start for most.
It's even drier in Hawke's Bay, where more stock is being sold than usual, especially store lambs. There's very little hay and silage being made in the region, and any other supplementary feed will cost a lot to buy in. Summer crops have also done poorly, largely due to the lack of rain. Irrigators are busy running, though some water restrictions have also kicked in. The dry is more welcome news for those in the viticulture and horticulture sector. It's largely situation normal for those in Manawatu Rangatike. Warmer temperatures have helped those getting last-minute crops into the ground. A lack of moisture is holding up pasture growth. If things go to seed, feed quality will deteriorate. There's also still some docking happening, and many hill country farmers are holding their first on-farm lamb sales.
Conditions are also dry in Wairarapa, where those that can are busy irrigating. Farmers are busy getting ready for the summer, and those concerned about feed levels are looking to offload their store lambs. Despite this, farmer confidence seems to be improving, especially with the OCR dropping this week. In Horo Whenua, a grower has been busy putting in the first watermelon and zucchini crops. He expects they'll be ready just in time for Christmas. Cloudy days have halved asparagus production for one of New Zealand's largest growers on the coast. About 8 millimetres of rain this week has helped ease things.
Across Cook Strait to Tasman, it's been generally damp and cool. Sheep and beef farmers have been able to cut and bale very good crops of baleage. In hop gardens, plant training's nearing completion, with some varieties near the top of the strings already. Our contact at Tapawera says the work is intensive and each season there's a bit of a struggle to find reliable staff. Irrigation sprinklers have been put to work over the past week due to a drying wind and some scorching temperatures. A great spring and some early summer heat is helping lambs to bolt ahead in the Marlborough Sounds. A farmer at Waitui says there won't be great numbers at weaning, but lambs are very healthy and more valuable. The Kenepuru Road is being worked on, giving farmers in the outer Sounds some confidence. A mussel farmer in the Sounds says some of the crop has been harvested with good weights being achieved. Over the past few years, greenshell mussels have been affected by water temperatures and other environmental conditions. A new purpose-built harvest boat developed specifically for more open ocean mussel harvesting work has just been launched.
Most dairy farmers have finished AI, or artificial insemination, in South Westland, and now they're turning their hand to cultivation and replanting. They're still getting their fair share of rain, but the sun's been out and cows are loving it. Our contact at Ross said another positive is milk prices are very high, fertiliser prices have gone down, and his cull cows sent to the works paid half as much again on last year's prices. Despite a good dose of rain 3 weeks ago, Canterbury, Waitaha, is on a knife edge. Increasingly dry conditions mean some farmers are already weaning lambs and selling as many prime as possible, while pricing is good and there's still a bit of feed about. Those with irrigation are flat out watering crops and grass. Despite conditions on the ground, optimism within the primary sector is growing.
When Cosmo called a farmer in central Otago's Ida Valley, he was on his tractor raking up meadow hay. He said everyone's into lamb marking now that shearing's done, getting in winter feed crops, mostly fodder beet, and making tons of baleage. There's a good supply of water for irrigation. Crossbred and half-bred wool prices, despite coming up a bit, are still diabolical, he says. Conditions were finally improving in Mirihuku Southland until the region was slammed by yet more cold and rain. It's been a season to forget, said our contact near Gore. Due to a lack of vitamin D, stock have been very slow out of the blocks. With no spring flush, lambs were weaned early and on dairy farms, milk supply is well back. Despite the soft ground, tractors have been able to get out onto paddocks. Most people are sowing fodder beet and grain crops. In general, farmers in the region are feeling flat and stressed and are already looking towards next season. Some sun is needed ASAP.
This is Country Life on RNZ National 101 FM.
Now we're heading to Golden Bay with Cosmo Kentish Barnes. He's with Tony Hitchcock, an artisan who crafts wooden garden baskets known traditionally as trugs.
We're in the Anatoki Valley, a little bit out of Takaka Township, and we're standing under the awning of the Trug workshop, looking out into our veggie garden on a very wet but mild spring day.
It's fabulous for the garden.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's been an amazing growing season. Like you can see, the spuddies are doing really well, so it's all good. We're happy to have the rain.
Your veggie garden's inspiring me because mine's a bit of a state at the moment. I've got heaps of work to do on it.
Well, it's one of my main hobbies, so I don't find it a hardship. My parents have grown veggies all their life, and my aunts and uncles and that, so it's just natural. And my partner Maddie, she does a lot of our preserving, so yeah, it's a win-win.
Now in the paddock behind us there's a flock of sheep, and Tony, you've got some sheep too.
Yeah, so that's the neighbours' sheep, which is great. So we've got an acre here, an acre of paradise, and we've got 2 sheep and 1 orphan lamb and several weckers and 6 chooks around the back.
And Maddie, you were saying that the flock of sheep are owned by your uncle and aunt.
Yeah, so the farm around us here was part of the old McCullum block, so Tony's grandmother's a McCullum, and his house was built by Alexander McCullum, who was back in Tony's family. My aunt and uncle bought it from the McCullums, and we bought it off them. So it's come back to Tony's side of the family via my family. Yeah, so that house you can see through there was where my grandparents retired, and I visited here as a child every summer. And through the trees is my aunt's house, and up the hill is my cousin. My cousin's living in that house, and Tony's parents are the next farm over. Yeah, just over on the Long Plain Road, which is just about a kilometre away from here. And so my kids are 6th generation in Takaka and in this valley up Kautinga and Anatoki.
What was your childhood like?
Fairly idyllic, yeah. Dylan Thomas's Fern Hill poem sums it up for me. You know, the streams and the creeks and the hills and the hayfields and all of that. It was very pastoral, very idyllic. Yeah.
Now, you must get asked this all the time. What is a trug?
A trug is a traditional garden carry-all made from willow or hazel. That's the frame, and the slats are cottonwood poplar. And they have been around for hundreds of years, and traditionally made in Sussex and southeast England. A bit like the wickerwork willow baskets, they've come over here with the settlers, and the way they're put together means they're much stronger than what they look or how they feel, and with the very slightest of care they'll last for decades. So
Yes.
yeah,
And so how did you become a trug maker?
probably goes right back to when I got my very first job at about the age of 13, mowing the lawns of the old trug maker, Brett Hutchinson. We became good friends, and he became something of a mentor for me. And over the years, I helped Brett around his workshop. Then, when we were just starting a family, Brett said he wanted to retire, and if we were interested in taking over the business, which was a surprise and an honour. And at the time I was working as a ranger up in the Kaharangi National Park, which is a fantastic job, but tough when you've got little children because just away all the time. So it was the right time for us, and henceforth there was a very large learning curve, and
So did you become his apprentice?
yeah, I did. And a very hectic apprenticeship because we were very busy with small children at that stage, and I kept on some of my other work at the same time until it became financially stable for us. And yeah, slowly became a trug maker, and I'm still learning. It's the kind of job you're always learning, you never stop. And Brett, he's just over the swing bridge over the Anatoki River, and if I'm stuck with something, he's happy to come over and we'll talk it over, and I'll show him what's going wrong, and his 25 years of experience comes out.
How good to have a mentor just across the river.
I'm enormously lucky. It's been an amazing help, but he thoroughly enjoyed having his workshop cleared out of... Well, just weaned that lamb.
Oh, well, let's go into your workshop and find out more.
Sure, come on in.
Thank you. The workshop is a woodworker's heaven. Old hand tools line the walls. Trugs and milking stools that Tony also makes hang from the rafters and cover tables. And timber slats that form the body of the trugs are stacked in reach of Tony's working area. That's centred around his wooden making horse. It all starts in the big outdoors though.
So the first part of the process is me walking up and down riverbanks and through obliging farmers' paddocks and choosing a really good cottonwood poplar. Everything here apart from the copper fixings is from the Tākaka River catchment, mainly around the farm margins and in people's orchards and gardens. So I'll fell the tree and cut it into logs, and we have a wonderful local sawmiller, and he mills all the timber into 2-inch timber, comes back here as fillet stacked and dried, and then I bring it in here and it's worked down to very thin pieces of wood which become the trug slats.
So do you spend most of your time straddling this making horse?
Yes, so I spend a lot of my life on this horse, and I'm processing the timber, and also when I'm making the trugs. I have the steamer here, which is essentially like a large kettle.
Oh, I was wondering what that bubbling noise was.
So it's quietly bubbling away in the corner, and it's great in winter, it keeps you warm, and summer not quite so good.
So this vertical steel steam tube is about, 20 centimetres across and a metre high, and you're putting a poplar slat into it, and that's what makes it more flexible.
That's correct. So I'm dropping it into the steamer and giving it a few seconds in there, bringing it out, working it round my knee, getting the curve, and when it dries out it will hold its pattern really well.
And now this piece of trug board is perfectly curved on each side.
Yes.
It's the steaming's so quick, it only takes about, 5 or 10 seconds?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the quality of the wood, but for the rims and the handles, when we're making them in midwinter, they take considerably more steaming simply because the wood's thicker.
And the steamer's right there, so you don't have to get off the making horse.
Yes, that's right, yeah, and I've got all my little tools set up here with me, so there's these curious little hammers. This used to be a farrier's hammer, but it's been modified to be a trug maker's hammer.
It's got a tiny handle.
So you can get right in there in the curve of the trug. And the draw knives came from Brett.
What's the draw knife?
So they're a long two-handled knife that you use to finish wood and bring wood down to the required thickness. It's going to bite into the wood as you're pulling it towards you.
It looks like the handlebars on an old-fashioned bicycle.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. And they're all subtly different. You'll notice this has a little curve in it. A little bit hard to describe over the radio, but you just use your feet to grip your piece of wood. And
There we are, so you're shaving thin slices off the wood.
yeah, so on a good piece of wood you can get it pretty much like a knife edge, but it does take some practice.
Yeah.
So the other part of the process is the rims and the handles of the trugs.
Well, they look like they're made from timber and bark.
Yeah, so they are strips of split down hazel or willow that we harvest in the winter when the sap's not running, and it means that when we process that timber under steam, the bark adheres to the timber and becomes a beautiful and a hard-wearing laminate. And it's entirely natural. There's no glues or anything required. It's all about choosing the right piece of timber and steaming it for the right amount of time at the right time of year.
What's the hardest part of making a trug?
I think when I'm assembling a trug, I'm steaming the slats and just getting everything nice and symmetrical and tight so there's no little gaps is a great challenge.
It is very much like putting a puzzle together.
Yeah, and each one of these has a subtle curve because how they would fit together vertically doesn't work when you've steamed a curve onto them where the edges meet. So there's these little subtleties which really get your head scratching, and it keeps me thinking. I love it. I sit here listening to the Radio New Zealand on the transistor and the bubbling of the steamer and the tapping of the hammer. My neighbour reckons it sounds like there's a cobbler working in here, tap, tap, tapping away. And that's about the only noises, so not so good for dramatic sound effects.
In that case, I might take a little video, and hopefully listeners who are interested will be able to watch you do your thing.
Absolutely, yep.
Now let's have a look at some of your trugs here, because you've got small ones, big ones, long ones. Everyone looks like it's been made for a different purpose.
Yeah, that's correct. So our biggest seller is the traditional Sussex trug, which is just a great size for carrying your garden produce or
cucumbers, potatoes,
yeah,
tomatoes. You could fit quite a lot of produce in that trug.
Yes, like as far as our household goes, we treat them as a garden tool and a kitchen tool, and if they get a wipe out with a warm rag occasionally, well then that's about all the treatment they get.
All your veggies get to your kitchen via a trug.
Absolutely, yes. And we've got the big Devonshire maund. So
what are they traditionally used for?
These are traditionally used in Devonshire for potato and apple harvest. So they're more like a bucket.
Yep.
Cooper's bucket, and these are by far the hardest and the slowest item we make, but in a way they're my favourite item because Once I start building one, I fall into a wonderful state of mind.
Do you zone out when you're making one?
I believe so, yeah, that would be a good way to describe it. And the great thing is once you start building one, you can't stop. So that's it. I'm not available for childcare duties or anything while I'm making a maund.
That could be handy at times.
Yeah.
Brett taught Tony how to make these sort of as an aside to making trugs. And then later we found out that Tony is one of 2 or 3 people left in the world who are still making them.
Yeah, and Maddie, how are you involved in the trug business?
Anything that involves a computer. Tony's allergic to computers, or they're allergic to him. Yeah, so I do the website and marketing and the accounts.
When he gets time, Tony also does other work.
So I still do a bit of fencing and forestry work just to make up in the slow times, but I think that's actually healthy for me as well, because I love being in the workshop, but it's good to do something completely different and work with my mates as well. So it all dovetails in pretty well, really.
So right now, I guess you're gearing up for the busy season.
That's correct, yeah. Yep. From now on in, it's usually pretty hectic, and all our kids are growing up, so it's getting easier now to be out here and making trugs full time, so it's a wonderful feeling.
That was trug maker Tony Hitchcock. Cosmo was also talking to his partner Maddie at Tony's Trug Workshop in Golden Bay's Anatoki Valley.
Time to meet Anthony and Angela Tringham, the couple growing heirloom tomatoes in Clevedon, southeast of Auckland, with a little help from a very special bug.
So here we are standing in a meadow. It is hip high with wildflowers and wild grasses.
The other thing to remember with Anthony saying a meadow, this is a New Zealand meadow. A lot of people, when they think of meadow and that sort of thing, they think of these pretty flowers from English meadows. You can plant all those and they do look beautiful, but they're not going to grow back next year because they don't work here.
One of the things we like to say is don't mow your lawns.
And why is that?
It's because what we're trying to do is to create an entire ecosystem outside our greenhouses. And what that means is, so we are standing here in a mixed herb ley. We've got wild carrot, cocksfoot, plantain, red clover, white clover, suckling clover, pretty little white things, Yorkshire fog, and goodness knows what else. All these flowers, they nurture the good insects that we want to grow outside and then fly into our greenhouses.
In the past, it was always, what was it considered, a concrete outside? What was it? There was a name for it.
When we went to university in 1984, we were told that you want to have nothing outside your greenhouse.
There's a name for it.
Scorched earth.
Scorched earth, that's
Yes.
it. That's what I was trying to think of. So you go round any serious greenhouses, which is not ours because we're on a farm, which is different, and they have concrete around them. But we've sometimes been to major greenhouses and there's this concrete everywhere, and always there'll be a crack somewhere and a tomato plant will grow up because that's what they do. We've gone and we've seen them absolutely covered in whitefly because there's nothing there to attack them. So what we're doing here is we're stopping that scorched earth and we're inviting every single native insect we can to come in. And also the other thing was, in the past people obviously they sprayed, but even if they were using biocontrols, which we use, they were just reliant on just the biocontrols you've got. Whereas what we believe now is that there are so many native insects that we actually know nothing about, and they're all here and they're all a barrier. So insects that we don't want coming into our greenhouse, they're coming here and they've got to fight this battle.
Because they've got something else instead, a new
Yep.
environment and
Yep.
sacrificial plants they might be more interested in than the tomatoes are,
Yep.
are the only thing for miles.
And so again, it's a whole of ecosystem approach. Where in the past we might have focused on just one or two things. Now we want as much diversity around our greenhouses as possible.
Well, let's go have a look inside the greenhouses.
Okay, let's go.
Come on, Riley.
Welcome, come on in. So this is our heirloom tomato greenhouse. As you can see, it's a bit chaotic.
It's lovely and warm in here.
It certainly is.
It's a lot warmer.
What temp does it normally get up to?
We like to keep it around 25. It gets too hot in summer, so it can get to about 35.
Which tomatoes don't like.
Too hot, yeah. How many tomatoes would I be looking at here in the greenhouse at the moment?
4,000. We lose count of how many different varieties we have because they're all so chaotic and random.
Primarily you are focused on some of the heirloom varieties.
We certainly are, so come and have a look.
Smells so gorgeous as well, actually.
This gorgeous tomato is a marmande. It is a French style. It is very crinkly, very flavoursome and very red.
Because it's just been picked. Our general thing as well with picking is we believe that the fruit gets its flavour from staying on the plant, not the vine, the plant. And so if you take it off when it's not quite ripe, you just lose that flavour.
Why tomatoes? How did you get started? Why did you pick this particular crop?
Every good story starts with a disaster. So I'm saying this is mainly Anthony, he, with his family, grew pre-packed cherry tomatoes for supermarkets. And even back then, Anthony basically never sprayed. So he used biocontrols way back in the very early days. And because of that, he was the one that found this new insect that he didn't like. And Anthony, being the nerd that he is, got thoroughly excited by it and contacted MAF and said, oh, what is this? And they didn't know what it was. And so they searched around, they found out, and it was the potato-tomato salad. So basically they shut us down.
And so after that, we found the Clevedon Farmers Market. Helen Dorrestein from the Clevedon Farmers Market came and said, why don't you grow tomatoes for us?
And it's grown from there.
Yeah. And then once we started, people didn't want boring round red cherry tomatoes. They wanted heirloom tomatoes. They wanted big red beefsteak.
Even before that, what we were amazed about, so it was at a time where all the big companies were just dumping tomatoes, okay? And so we had our punnets that were selling at $4 each, which was a very high price. And what we couldn't believe, that everyone that came in, they were buying 4 punnets or 6 punnets or 8 punnets, and it was just like, wow. And it was only ages and ages later we found out that Helen had gone around everyone in Clevedon and said, basically, you've got to buy from these guys, you've got to support them, you've got to do this, we need to keep them. So it's her serious support that got us really excited about it. And our classic thing is we'd come home after doing something like doing a market, and we sit down, we have a glass of wine, and we think, oh, what do we do? And it was one time that we came and we sat down and we said, this is just rubbish, growing pre-packs. We've got to grow interesting things. So we ripped out half of a greenhouse.
And we planted fabulous heirloom varieties instead, and we've never looked back.
Do you mind if I ask about the growing process just while we're standing here? I'm looking at the box down there at the middle. How do you kind of start?
What we do is we grow in cocoa peat. So it's like a composting mix, which we mix with seaweed and lots of beneficial organisms, and then we plant the tomato plants on top. The good thing about cocoa peat is that it holds water and it also holds lots of oxygen. So it is a really sweet thing to grow plants in.
And is this kind of part of those agroecology principles?
It certainly is. And so not only do we have lots of complicated stuff above ground, we're also doing lots of complicated stuff below ground.
Another thing we do is the cocoa peat we keep for 3 years. So the people you buy the cocoa peat off, they say you have to change it every year. But as far as we're concerned, in the cocoa peat, we've got such an amazing ecosystem in there that it's terrible to lose it. And so we want it back for the next season. The only thing that makes us stop and change it is at a point it just gets too many weeds and a bit too out of control.
And so what we're trying to do is to create a complex environment around the roots that's full of life and bacteria and fungi, and that's what keeps the roots healthy. What I'm holding here is a tobacco leaf, and on the tobacco leaf are dozens of little insects which are on our team. These little guys are called Engitatus. They grow on tobacco, and then they also eat bad insects. So we grow Engitatus on tobacco, they breed on this, and then we spread them throughout the tomato house, and they eat the bad insects. And this is quite new science. It's using something that's locally available to do a good job for us.
Also, can you see what he did with the leaf? Yep. If down at the back, they're not getting around, he'll pick leaves and just throw them around.
And that just helps naturally spread the bugs around.
Yep.
So coming on through. You might ask the question, why doesn't everyone grow heirloom tomatoes? And the answer is they are total rubbish to grow, and they only put out a fruit if it suits them. Take this variety here. This is vintage brandywine. On this plant, it's been in here for months, and it hasn't given me any tomatoes yet.
And you can't really do anything about that, I suppose.
No, it's as infuriating as hell.
Fire them?
The plant next to us, it's going to give us a couple of tomatoes, and then nothing's going to happen on this plant for a couple of months. And then it'll give us 3 more plants. Three more fruit. This tomato looks like it's going to grow really well, and this tomato looks like it's going to give us lots of fruit, but it's a liar. It didn't give us any fruit down here for a month. And what I do is I come in and I curse them and I sing to them and I say, if you don't grow me some good fruit, you're all being pulled out. And so this one, she's going to put out 3 good trusses, and then if I'm not paying any attention, she'll chuck it in again.
Just to spite you.
Just to spite you. These guys keep me awake at night. If we're selling tomatoes and we go on menu at a restaurant, we can't not supply. But the tomatoes don't care about that. They just care about putting out a few of their fruit and then doing whatever. This sort of business only works if you can get the tomatoes picked and then delivered within a few days. So we couldn't sell to supermarkets.
Who is your primary demographic? Obviously you guys have the farmers market, but I understand you're also well established in the local restaurant scene and other foodies.
I think that's our main thing, is hospitality. The thing as well with heirloom tomatoes is they don't have a long shelf life, and as I've said, we like to pick quite right. So we deliver twice a week, and it's all pre-ordered. So each chef basically orders what they want. Well, we do them in 5 kilo boxes, and they just go out, they get them the next day. So it's really quick turnover.
I see there's a couple of staff members around getting ready for your picking tomorrow. How many people do you guys employ, and what's your season like generally?
Ultimately, we employ up to 20 people. We keep 4 over winter now. It used to be 2, we now keep 4 over winter. So we're moving up there now. We're probably at 9 just now, but our season is just kicking off.
And as always, when our season starts, we hope that people still want to buy our tomatoes. So if anyone's listening on Radioland, please come to the Cleveland Farmers Market or go to your local restaurant and ask for heirloom tomatoes.
Do you have a favourite type of tomato?
This is interesting. If I said...
Yours is marigold.
Mine is marigold.
Mine's vintage brandywine.
If I said my favourite tomato is the worst...
And 2 of them are assholes.
I know. If I said my favourite tomato is the hardest one to grow and the most fickle, obviously I like difficult people, don't I?
Yeah, you do.
and that's why I've married Angela. So obviously I'm a little bit contrary, aren't I? We like challenges. We wouldn't do this if we wanted something easy.
That was Anthony and Angela Tringham I was speaking to from Curious Croppers in Clevedon. You can find the couple every Sunday at the local farmers market. We also have a Curious Croppers tea towel to give away if you can tell us the name of the bug the couple has been using to help reduce pests. If you missed this, you can listen again by looking for Country Life on any podcast listening app. Email your answers to country@rnz.co.nz to go into the draw.
Hi, I'm Mike King from Pawariki Honey.
And I'm Kate King.
And you're listening to Country Life
on RNZ National.
It's become a bit of a dirty word, slash. The waste trimmings from forestry, a lot of which ended up piled high on Tairāwhiti's beaches after Cyclone Gabrielle. In the far north, near the small community of Te Kā'au, producer Sally Round found a plan being hatched to turn that waste into something good for the climate, the soil and farm animals.
You got a copy, Dan? Can you reach those ones on your left-hand side, coming through their gut there, just up on the left-hand side here?
Another tree being felled in Pārangaranga Incorporation's A Block. It's part of a Māori-owned forestry and farm operation with about 4,000 shareholders on the narrow Opori Peninsula, Te Hiku o Te Ika, or Tail of the Fish. Here, pine trees, sheep and beef cattle are being farmed on land sandwiched between the Pacific Ocean and the Tasman Sea, bordered by 90 Mile Beach to the west and the ecologically rich Parengarenga Harbour to the east. Trees have been a huge part of this area's history and development. Kauri forest once covered the region thousands of years ago, before being swallowed up by sand and swamp. In the 1960s, exotic pines were pitched as the answer to halt the marching sands being blown in from the west and smothering roads and farmland. This National Film Unit production from the 1960s, with a very perky music track, shows a tractor pulling workers on trailers through the dunes, planting grasses to hold the loose sand in preparation for the pine seedlings.
Each year, a protective belt of marram grass about 15 chains wide is planted. The encroaching sands are halted and consolidated.
It was a government afforestation program, and Parengarenga landowners got involved too, leasing their land to the Crown for Pinus radiata. This was amid some doubt about the economics of forestry in such a barren, isolated area, but the trees grew wood that was dense and strong.
The next step is to make the sandy wastes productive. To supply the only deficiency, nitrogen, fast-growing tree lupins sown where the clumps of grass give protection. Within only 5 years, the lupin gives a complete coverage of the dunes. Now trees can be planted. Most of the country can be covered by crawler tractors planting 10,000 trees, a forest a day. The trees grow well in sand, and with 1,500 acres planted every year, the machines have altered the whole pattern of sand control. The Forestry Department has not only freed coastal farmland of encroachment, but has grown a valuable crop of millable trees.
Nearly 50 years after signing the lease, the Parengarenga Incorporation shareholders gained ownership of the forest in 2016 and have since acquired forestry rights to another block to the east, making over 10,000 hectares of forest under their incorporation. They've invested in machines and trained up 23 staff to thin and harvest the trees.
My name is Dan Henderson, Operations Manager for the forest here in Parengarenga Incorporation. We started harvesting here, clearfell harvesting of the big wood back in January of 23. So we've done just over 12 to 18 months now.
Wow, and we've just come over the brow of the hill and there are the blocks that have been harvested. And I guess those trees in the distance are due for harvesting in the next, how long will it take?
We've planned it so that we've got a 30-year rotation. A lot of our staff here are young. When I say young, they're mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s. And they've got 30 years work in front of them if they look after it. So you don't get that with any forestry operation of any sort of structure nowadays. These guys, for the best part, most of them live 5 minutes from the gate, you know.
Would any of them be shareholders?
Yep, most of them are shareholders.
Most of them are?
Yep.
Dan takes me to meet one of the workers, Levi, who's a loader operator. Are you from here?
Yeah, I'm from Te Kau. Yeah.
Have you always worked in forestry?
No, I used to work out on the Whangarei ports in Marsden Point, loading and unloading all the log ships and freight ships and everything that comes in and goes, I guess.
So you're from this area, you've come home?
Yeah. I was in Whangarei for the last 5 years, only just moved back in August last year.
Yeah, what's that like?
I love it. Yeah, can't beat it. It's always good to be back home, eh?
And are you a shareholder here?
Not yet, no. But I think, a lot of the boys here that do work in the bush are shareholders.
Does it make a difference? Like, do you feel like you're more kind of connected to the place, or?
Oh, I'm not too sure for them, but yeah, just for me, knowing that I'm from here, my ancestors and everything are from here, so that just makes me feel connected in general, I guess. Yeah.
My name is Michael Wikitera and I'm the workplace supervisor here at Parengarenga Incorporation, helping with environmental work, FSC, training and just helping out with the other guys.
Copy Dan.
Mike mentioned FSC, well, that's the Forestry Stewardship Council, and this year Pārangaranga gained certification from the international organisation, which means it's been recognised for the way it's managing things in an eco-friendly and responsible way.
This is an area here is a classic example.
Among the environmental projects, better protection of Lake Wahakari in partnership with local iwi. And we stop on the forestry track for a better view of the lake in the distance.
And so that was a partnership because we understood that riparian area had to be increased because previous to our planting regime, the trees were planted pretty much right on the lake edge. If they could be planted, they were. So there's areas there where you can see that there's still a lot of pampas and weed, and those are the places that were previously planted in pine. And so we've brought that back quite a bit. So I think at least at the minimum we lost over 30 hectares of forestry planted land. We would have been well within our rights to say, well, 10 metres is all we're going to give. But just, like I said, when you look at some of that regenerating vegetation down there, and tea tree and cabbage trees and all the other smaller natives that we've got there.
Further along the track, though, is a sign of the main reason I've come to Pārangaranga, to check out their plans for the piles and piles of woody offcuts that forests such as this produce.
Those big piles are the reason why, we've got this natural resource of slash that's just ideal for biochar.
Biochar. Put simply, it's a charcoal-like substance made from heating wood in large kilns. It's been hailed as a bit of a wonder product, a kind of black gold, good for improving soil when spread on pasture, sequestering carbon, and even improving animal health when used as a feed supplement. Pārangaranga Incorporation has done some trials, but wants to do more.
When this whole biochar trial took off, did you think it was some kind of hocus-pocus thing, or did you know about it before?
I didn't know about it before, but I could see the benefits of it. And we were sort of one of the first to have a crack at it and see if it would work. We had the product there. We had a carbonizer to burn it up in, and the SOP was written by a professional. So, it was sort of simple enough to follow, and away we went. We had a small setup that was pretty labour intensive. Come out, cut the wood, poke it in, burn it, shovel it out, put it in a bag, and send it down the road. The new ones, they'll come along. You'll pick all that stuff up, you dump it down here in a big area, it'll get picked up, in-fed and dried at the same time it's going in, chipped and then burnt, and then your product's coming in and out. It would have been a 24/7 operation.
So the carbonisers have come a wee way on now, have they?
Well, carbonisers overseas have been way ahead of us, so, and we're just catching up with that bit of technology, but ballpark figures to do a setup in here that would be viable for us, around $8 million.
One of the problems that we have with the slash is that it takes up a lot of area on the ground in the forest. So that was a good way to get rid of that slash and turn it into a usable product.
And you've still got piles of it back there, so this is for future trials, if you go ahead.
We've got a 25-year cycle coming up, so
You're going to have plenty of it.
We're going to have plenty of it, but one of the other uses was fertiliser as well. So that was the farm uses $500,000.
The company also farms sheep and beef on land beyond the forest gates. 11,000 sheep and 5,300 head of cattle. In the warm climate, they lamb early to beat others to the Christmas lamb market. I'm with General Manager Barry Bouton.
So from here basically is all to the left and to the right is all our farmlands.
So we've just come over the breast of the hill and rolling green pasture in front of us. Is this all sand country too?
It's loamy sand country, so biochar in particular would add to the soil health considerably in terms of what we can grow and the growth rates of our pastures themselves.
We did see the slash as we took a tour through the forestry block before. We saw the slash piled up in readiness for the biochar, for the burning.
Yes, absolutely. That's almost a stockpile waiting and good to go. So up on the hill over there is our workshop. That's where both our forest and our farm mechanics.
What are we looking at here, Barry?
We're looking at Paringaringa Harbour, which is where we get our name from, obviously, Paringaringa Incorporation as an entity. And, the people of the land very much associate their culture is absolutely immersed in the harbour. That's their breadbasket, effectively, at the end of the day, has been historically, and they treasure it. So, part of our brief as an incorporation is to keep the waterways clean, keep the harbour clean, make sure that there's no cattle effluent going into the harbour, and protecting it to the best of our abilities, and exercising that key Māori, value of katiakitanga.
How are you doing that?
We're doing that through riparian fencing in the main. We are doing that through protecting the soils through developing 2 hectare cell blocks, so that we can fully rotate our stock and not destroy the soil, through overuse of cattle in any one area. And just keeping an eye on everything. Biochar once again has got an ability to be able to be a key contributor in that area through filtering out contaminants in the waterways that might otherwise hit the harbour. But that's also part of the research project.
Let's talk about that research project. How long is it going to be going on for?
Indeterminate. It could be for the next 10 years. It's a long-term project that you're looking at. Results aren't available overnight. But as results filter through, it does enable some decisions to be made in terms of pressing a green light for investment purposes or not.
Barry says they've applied to the New Zealand Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre to do field trials in the next stage of biochar research.
To determine pasture growth rates, hopefully horticultural growth rates, how to fix the soil, what remedial effect it's got on our soils, and a whole bunch of trials.
What can you envisage here in terms of a biochar facility?
Probably utilising about anything from 7 to 15,000 tonnes per annum of forest waste, mostly slash. It has to be slash, otherwise you're not earning the international carbon credits that are applicable to that. You can't use good wood and expect to be earning environmental payoff benefits. If it's 7,000 tonnes, you'd be looking at that transferring into about 1,600 tonnes of biochar per annum.
And just used on farm here?
Just used on farm, yeah.
Not
Our farm's big enough to be able to take it all. That's not the end game, though. We'd be wanting to put it onto the market, but it's an immature market, as I said. So we've got an ability to apply it, on farm, but hopefully we'd develop, national markets for biochar to be used on, other soil types where the benefit can be maximised.
What happens to slash at the moment?
It gets transferred into methane and put into the air. Effectively, it just rots. Ultimately it rots and it turns into methane, which is a bad gas, to be putting into the atmosphere. So putting into biochar lasts like close on to 1,000 years underground. It captures all the baddies and is producing benefits over that extremely long time frame. So it's a negative carbon.
Would you be the first integrated farm forestry operation using biochar in this way?
In New Zealand.
In New Zealand.
Pretty much so. I'm unaware of any other organisation at this point in time utilising. In fact, yes, you could say categorically, probably yes. But internationally, most biochar has actually been used in horticultural applications. There's very, very little academic research that has been done on pasture land. So by extension yes, I imagine it's been done elsewhere in the world, but not an awful, enough of it to be making an overwhelming, data bank of scientific literature.
Can you see this being a big win for on-farm greenhouse gas emissions?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. It's a game changer. I have never heard anybody say anything negative about biochar. It's only positive stuff that everybody's tremendously excited about its potential to be a game changer for climate change research, if you would.
Barry Bouton, General Manager of Parenga Incorporation. And that story was produced by Sally Round. Well, that's it for the show this week. Thanks for joining us. Now you can find photos and stories from this week's show at rnz.co.nz/countrylife.
And don't forget, you can listen to Country Life anytime you like by subscribing to our podcast. You'll find it on any podcast platform.
Send us your feedback and your answers to be in to win a Curious Croppers tea towel on country@rnz.co.nz.
And that's it for this episode of Country Life. Do let us know your feedback by emailing country@rnz.co.nz.
Click follow on your app if you don't want to miss an episode of Country Life. And if you enjoyed the podcast, we'd love you to give us a plug on social media or tell a friend about this show. Click the share button in this app to send this episode to a friend.
The stories in this episode were produced and presented by myself, Janina Schwanecker, Sally Round and Cosmo Kentish Barnes. In the studio production team today, David Knowles and Phil Benge.
Catch you next time.
Ka kite.